Peace be upon you, my friend. I am Mohammed Layiq Sediqi, the father of Holophase. Before we take our first step into episode 10, into the art of engineering and control, we need to pause. We need to look back at the ground we've covered, not as a list of dry ideas, but as a single, continuous story. The story of how we went from seeing a strange flicker in the corner of reality's eye to holding, in our hands, the principles of its mother tongue. This is the story of learning that the universe doesn't just exist, it speaks, and that we, if we listen carefully enough, can learn to speak back. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine you're standing on a hill at night, looking down at a vast, sleeping city. A million points of light, windows, street lamps, moving cars. At first, it's just beautiful chaos, a glittering, meaningless scatter. But you keep watching, and patterns start to emerge. You see how certain streets pulse in time with the traffic lights. You see how the bright downtown district dims as the residential neighborhoods light up for the evening. You watch the flow of headlights curl around the central park in a smooth, rhythmic river. What seemed random begins to feel intentional, structured. It has a rhythm, a grammar. The city isn't just there, it's communicating. It's a living story, written in light and motion. And you've just begun to read it. That is our journey with Holophase. We began with a suspicion. What if reality isn't just a collection of separate things, atoms, forces, thoughts, galaxies? What if, underneath all that stunning diversity, there is a single, continuous script? A fundamental language in which everything is written. We gave that language a name, Phi, the Holophase. Think of Phi as a silent, endless sea of tiny clocks. At every point in space, a clock hand points to a phase, an angle on a circle. By itself, that angle is just a number. But when these clocks begin to turn, when Phi starts to change, that's when the story begins. The world we experience isn't made from the static positions of the hands. It's made from how they change, how they speed up, slow down, twist, knot, and fall into synchrony with their neighbors. The entire cosmos in this vision is a shimmering tapestry of these phase relationships. One thread, infinite patterns. Episode 6, The Alphabet of Reality. In episode 6, we turned that poetic suspicion into a working science. We made one radical choice. We treated Phi as the only primitive thing. No separate substances, no independent forces, just one field and an endless set of questions we can ask about how it changes. The answers to those questions, the mathematical derivatives of Phi, became our alphabet, our grammar. We started with the most natural questions. How does Phi change from one moment to the next? How does it vary from one point in space to its neighbor? Asking these didn't give one answer. It gave three echoes all at once. The time echo, omega. The local rhythm, the tempo. The space echo, k. The wave vector, the spatial texture, the shape of the gradient. And from their interplay, motion, the drift, the flow, the propagation. Time, space, and motion weren't separate stages. They were three shadows cast by a single structure, the structure of how Phi changes. We call this the tri-unity, and once you see it everywhere. A song has a tempo, time, a melody, space, and the rhythm that makes you move, motion. A river has a flow rate, a pattern of bends, and a drifting leaf. Your heartbeat has a rhythm, a squeezing pattern in the muscle, and a pulsing wave of blood. One structure, three inseparable voices. Then we began to climb. We called it the master tree of derivatives. Each step up the tree asks a finer question about change. First derivative, speed. Second derivative, acceleration, the rate of change of speed. Third derivative, jerk, the rate of change of acceleration. And so on, forever. At every level, the triunity held. Every derivative revealed time, space, and motion, woven together. Then we met topology, the mathematics of shape that doesn't care about stretching, only cutting. The study of knots, holes, and defects. We realized something profound. Sometimes, Phi can't be smooth everywhere. Walk in a perfect circle around the point. Track the value of Phi. You might find that when you return to your starting point, phi has wound around its circle, not by a fraction, but by a full integer number of turns 1, 2, minus 1. That integer is the winding number, a topological invariant. You can't smooth it away. It's as robust as a full twist in a rubber band. And here, a miracle appeared. Quantization emerged automatically. Whole number counting wasn't a separate rule glued onto physics. It fell out of the grammar of phi. Phenomena like electric charge, magnetic flux, quantum numbers began to look like natural labels on the knots and twists in the phi field. By the end of episode 6, we had new glasses. We could start to translate. A rainbow wasn't just refraction, it was a story of how phi's derivatives, the refractive index, change with color. A draining sink was a tale of defects and winding. A vibrating guitar string was a standing wave in phi. A spiral galaxy, a long-range pattern in the cosmic phi field. A firing neuron, a tiny propagating sentence written in phase shifts. We hadn't explained everything, but we had a new framework. The world began to look less like a pile of separate objects and more like a unified tapestry, woven from one luminous thread. Episode 7. The Architecture of Meaning. Episode 7 was where we moved from alphabet to architecture, from letters to libraries. If episode 6 was learning the alphabet, episode 7 was realizing this language is complete, hierarchical, and self-aware. We introduced the jet. The jet of phi at a point is the complete local dictionary, the value of phi and all its derivatives of all orders right there. To know the jet is to know everything about how the story can continue from this very word. Then we asked a deep question. What does it mean for a phi pattern to mean something? Meaning, we proposed, lives in constraints, in what is not allowed. The words dog bites man and man bites dog are the same words, but the arrangement changes the meaning entirely. The grammar rules out nonsense. Similarly, a phi pattern gains semantic content. It means something, when not every possible deformation of it is allowed. Information becomes which configurations of phi are possible and which are ruled out. A heart beating in a steady rhythm carries the information life is proceeding. A heart in chaotic fibrillation carries the information danger, system failure. A smooth traffic flow means organized coordination. A frozen jam means breakdown. The raw values matter less than the patterns of allowed and forbidden change. Critically, episode 7 took self-reference seriously. Inside this vast sea of phi, there evolved strange, complex subpatterns. Brains, measuring instruments, notebooks, computers. These aren't outside the language. They are phi structures that have evolved to read and write other phi structures. A scientist with a notebook is a phi pattern, representing other phi patterns. This very conversation is a phi process, sound waves modulating the phi patterns in your brain and mine. The universe began to describe itself. To ground this, we created the Holophase language standard, the grammar book. Rules to take any valid description in any scientific dialect and rewrite it into a canonical phi sentence. This allowed for true translation, for checking deep consistency. And we never drifted into untestable fantasy. Every rule came with a way to test it, to break it. This language couldn't become a religion. It had to remain a science. We were laying out a research program. Episode 8, The Abstract Blueprint. In episode 8, we stepped into the silent, pure halls of mathematics. We asked, what is the essence of this language, before it describes any particular universe? We stripped away all physical interpretation. We treated phi as a perfect, abstract object in a Platonic realm. We dove deep into symmetry. The same underlying phi story can be written in countless ways. Different coordinates, different gauges, different perspectives, while remaining the same at heart. This led to equivalence classes, many surface forms, one deep statement. We developed the canonical form, the minimal, most standard spelling of a phi sentence. Like deciding color and color are the same word, and picking one for the dictionary. We explored universality. Could this language describe any system? We argued yes, not by decree, but because it's built from the most primitive questions one can ask about change and relation. The language of phi can express algorithms, causal chains, logical constraints. It is computationally complete. Digital circuits, weather models, economic simulations, neural networks, each becomes a complex phi sentence, evolving under the rules. Episode 8 was our inspection of reality's operating system blueprint. We zoomed out of any specific world and asked, what must any world written in phi obey? The answers were principles of symmetry, consistency, and the clear separation between physical content and mere notation. We began building the Holophase Codex, a catalog of what is possible in principle for such a language. By the end, the language stood alone, a symphony of pure form, a silent score waiting for an orchestra. Then came episode 9. The music began. If episodes 6 to 8 gave us the alphabet, dictionary, and grammar rules, episode 9 was where we pressed run. This was the generative grammar, the layer that takes the language and writes actual dynamic worlds. We began with a quiet revolution in perspective. The start of the universe wasn't a bang of matter in an empty void. It was the first sentence. Specific pattern of phase written across the entire cosmic page, the opening line. Then we turned on the machinery. The differentiation engine, the time derivative and the spatial gradient, became the universe's first production rules. Apply the time derivative, you get omega, the story of how fast phi changes in sequence. Apply the spatial gradient, you get k, the story of how fast phi changes across space. These aren't optional calculations. They are the first steps from a static pattern to a moving story. And these productions are linked by constraints. How k changes in time and how omega changes in space are tied together. Change one part of the sentence, and others must adjust to keep the meaning consistent. Recursion built an infinite tower. From omega and k, differentiate again. Get acceleration, curvature, shear. Again, jerk, hypercurvature. Like applying simple rewriting rules over and over to build paragraphs, chapters, volumes. The miracle? The system stays coherent. Not every wild fluctuation is allowed. The grammar maintains stability. Then, topology entered the generative process. Even smooth stories can tear. Defects arise where phi can't be smooth. Walk a loop around them, and you get an integer winding number. These integers act like charges. They influence how defects move, merge, annihilate. Their word lines braid over time. The braid type becomes a new, robust label, akin to quantum statistics. The language now wrote not just smooth fields, but particles, charges, exotic behaviors where history matters. We explored wave and field production. Dispersion relations told which frequency wave vector combinations are allowed, which notes an instrument can play. Wave packets showed how localized ripples travel, spread, interfere. Interference rules described how overlapping phi sentences combine into patterns of light and dark. Then, the heart, the dynamical grammar. We introduced the action, a single number, a kind of cost assigned to every possible history of phi. The universe doesn't choose arbitrary paths. It follows those where the action is stationary, usually minimal. From this one elegant principle, we rederived everything. Equations of motion, conservation laws, stability. Symmetries of the action, under time shifts, space shifts, rotations, gave conserved quantities, energy, momentum, angular momentum. Nonlinear terms allowed waves to interact, form solitons, trigger chaos, rogue waves, optical solitons, chemical patterns. We didn't stop at the microscopic. We looked at scale. Zooming out blurs details, but large-scale patterns persist. Effective grammars emerge. The equations of fluid dynamics aren't fundamental laws. They are a coarse-grained dialect of the holophase language, perfect for describing the average behavior of trillions of microscopic phi events. Elasticity, thermodynamics, even aspects of quantum and gravitational theory become different dialects of the same generative machinery. It's like reading the same epic as a children's picture book, a novel, and a technical manual. The details differ, the plot is recognizable. Crucially, Episode 9 wrapped everything in an operational constitution. Every piece of the grammar came with predictions, and with clear ways it could fail. For each component, dispersion, defect dynamics, action principles, we sketched real experiments. We described what data would count as success, what as noise, what as a clear violation. We defined where the grammar's validity should break, inviting its own extension. We turned Holophase from a beautiful story into a testable scientific program. By the end of episode 9, a staggering picture was in place. A single field, phi, with its infinite tree of derivatives and its generative grammar, could, in principle, write the full spectrum of reality. Classical paths, electromagnetic waves, quantum phenomena, gravitational curvature, topological matter, complex systems, emergent laws, and even self-referencing observers. All became sentences and paragraphs in the same continuous language. The universe wasn't just described by equations. It was actively being written and rewritten by this grammar at every moment. The bridge to episode 10. And that leaves us here, not as passive readers of a finished book, but as beginner authors, standing before a vast living manuscript. If the universe is written in a single language with a clear, testable grammar, then we can learn to speak it. Not magically, not for wishes, but in the way an engineer speaks the language of circuits, in the way a geneticist speaks the language of DNA. Episode 10 is that pivot, from understanding to participating. Episode 10, Engineering and Control, How to Speak and Program the Universe. This is our structural roadmap for turning Holophase from a descriptive science into a practical craft. It's built in interconnected layers. First, fluency and literacy. How do we go from the raw noise of sensor data to a clean reconstruction of the local phi field? How do we unwrap the phase, estimate its derivatives, spot grammatical structures in the mess of the real world? How do we design phi patterns that encode a specific message, a constraint, a behavior? This is moving from decoding to composition. Second, measurement engineering. If phi is the substrate, we'll need new instruments, devices that measure phase, its derivatives, topological invariants directly. New microscopes, cameras, interferometers, phase-sensitive detectors. These become the eyes and ears of a holophase literate culture. Imagine seeing not just brightness or color, but the local phase. Not just density, but the winding number. Calibration and standardization become sacred. Labs worldwide comparing phi sentences, ensuring this pattern here matches that pattern there. Third, phi programming. This is the development of true high-level languages where the variables are phi patterns in space, and the control structures are based on derivative rules. A phi program is a designed initial condition plus boundary manipulations intended to yield a specific outcome under the known grammar. A compiler bridges high-level goals to hardware. Move this mirror, pulse this laser, apply this voltage. An operating system manages resources, isolates processes, maintains consistency. It sounds like sci-fi, but shadows exist today in wave-based computing, metamaterials, topological photonics. Fourth, reality engineering. The applied frontier, designing phi patterns to design reality itself. Creating materials with custom properties by sculpting their internal fuzzy pattern. Stiffness, conductivity, transparency, dialed in. Sculpting fields into stable, useful shapes. Configuring defects to store information robustly. Creating local patches of reality where behaviors can be modified controllably and reversibly. On small scales, new sensors, computers, medical tools. On larger scales, environmental control, climate stabilization, new energy. On the grandest, conscious planetary stewardship, intentionally shaping ecosystems with a deep knowledge of the language. Fifth, phi-based information systems. Communication becomes encoding, transmitting, decoding messages as phi patterns. Storage finds stable, protected phi configurations, like topological defects, that hold bits for eons, resistant to local damage. Computation harnesses natural phi dynamics, soliton collisions, braiding of defects, wave interference, to perform logic. Networks become webs of interacting phi systems. a true planetary nervous system. Sixth, biology and cognition. If brains are exquisite Phi processors, then direct neural interfaces could aim for perfect fidelity, matching external engineered Phi patterns to internal ones. Healing reframed as restoring damaged Phi structures in tissues, heart rhythm, brain connectivity, immune coordination. The study of consciousness becomes the search for certain highly organized, self-referential, coherent regimes of Phi. We don't have all the answers, but the language gives us a rigorous way to ask the questions. Seventh, society and civilization. A civilization that speaks reality's language won't organize like ours. Economics shifts from scarcity of stuff to abundance of Phi patterns, designs, recipes, software for reality. Governance gains radical transparency if the state of critical systems is monitored in Phi variables, visible to all. Education shifts from memorizing facts to training deep Phi pattern recognition, seeing the underlying rhythms in music, physics, ecosystems, cities. Culture evolves. Art and shared experiences composed directly in the reality substrate. Performances written into the fields of light and matter around us. 8. Ethics and safety. This is the most critical layer. If you can edit the script, you must know where to stop. The rights of Phi patterns ceases to be strange when you realize every conscious being is one. What does it mean to respect or violate a coherent, living configuration? Safety protocols must contain unintended effects, prevent cascading failures, preserve the integrity of the larger story. Long-term stewardship becomes a central discipline. We must think as caretakers, not owners, across generations. Like nuclear or genetic tech, holophase engineering carries immense promise and profound danger. Wisdom becomes as important as knowledge. Ninth, ultimate horizons. Finally, we look to the furthest horizons, not as boast, but as direction. Questions of universe programming, artisan-level Phi creation, the meaning of purpose inside a written reality arise naturally. The complete human in this future is not a god. They are a wise participant, understanding enough grammar to act with skill, humility, and care, to design, repair, and protect, and to know when to leave things untouched. The three questions and honest promises. This whole journey is framed by three great questions. 1. What is the language? Episode 8, The Abstract Pure Structure of Phi. 2. How does it work? Episode 9, The Generative Grammar that Writes Worlds. 3. How do we use it? Episode 10, Engineering and Control. Episodes 6 and 7 were the essential preparation. Episode 6, Recognizing the Language in the Wild. Episode 7, Learning its deep internal structure. The journey is a spiral staircase. We've circled the same core ideas: Phi, derivatives, triunity, topology, action, information, each time at a higher level. First intuition, then structure, then abstract theory, then generative mechanism, now engineering practice. Like learning a human language, mimic sounds, learn words, learn grammar, study literature. Finally, write your own books. A critical thread runs through it all: prediction and intellectual honesty. At each stage, Holophase made specific, falsifiable promises to nature. Episode 6 promised, if reality is written in Phi, then waves should show specific phase relations, testable in optics, acoustics, fluids. Episode 7 promised, if it captures meaning, then different Phi configurations should lead to different, measurable outcomes in controlled experiments. Episode 8 promised universality. Every successful physical theory should have a holophase rewrite. A long project, but a clear criterion for failure. Episode 9 made concrete generative promises. If this grammar is right, then in this experiment, you must see this number, not that one. Each promise creates a place where holophase can be wrong. That's not a weakness, it's its greatest strength. A language that never risks being wrong can never be meaningfully right. I've spoken not as a prophet, but as a researcher laying out a program with built-in vulnerability. We've drawn a map and marked the cliffs. The promises of episode 10 are even more demanding because they involve control. It's one thing to say, if the world is written this way, you'll see X in experiment Y. It's another to say, if I write this phi pattern into the world, I will reliably get outcome Z. Here, Holophase stops being just a lens. It becomes a toolkit. The failures become more practical, but also more instructive. This spirit of prediction and falsifiability is the spine of Holophase. It stops the universe is a language from being a vague slogan. It keeps it anchored as a precise, testable, improvable framework. And it's this exact spirit we must carry into engineering. The more powerful the tools, the more vital the honesty. Standing at the threshold. So, as we stand here at the threshold of episode 10, think of the whole journey as building three things at once: a new way of seeing, a new way of describing, a new way of predicting. Episode 6 began to change our eyes. Episode 7 began to change our vocabulary. Episode 8 tightened the logic. Episode 9 connected it to concrete dynamics and experimental stakes. Now, episode 10 begins to change our hands. We will learn to touch reality more directly, not by ignoring its limits, but by respecting them. We'll design small, careful steps before large, ambitious ones. We'll think of local labs before planetary interventions. We'll constantly ask, what can we safely test next that will either strengthen or weaken this picture, while also doing something useful or beautiful? As you step with me into episode 10, carry this memory. Episode 6 taught us to see the single thread. Episode 7 taught us to understand the weave. Episode 8 showed us the blueprint of the loom. Episode 9 revealed the loom is running, writing the tapestry by itself. Episode 10 is where we learn, carefully and ethically, to touch the controls. You, listening, are not outside this. You are phi, listening to phi. You are a paragraph of the universe, reading the book it is written in. As we grow this language, the world may start to look different. Not less real, not less beautiful, but more connected, more intelligible, more alive. The flow of traffic, the rhythm of your pulse, starlight, a computer's hum, the rise and fall of markets, a growing forest, a shifting cloud, all may begin to feel like different paragraphs of one long, continuous, magnificent text. Remember the feeling of learning a language. One field, phi, the holophase. One continuous, cyclic movement, unfolding all of reality. Its derivatives form an infinite tree of questions and answers, weaving time, space, and motion into every phenomenon. Episodes 6 through 9 were about learning to read that tree. Episode 10 is where we begin to write. Try a simple experiment today. Pick a small patch of reality, a boiling kettle, a traffic pattern, a swaying tree, your own breath. Quietly ask, if this is a sentence in the holophase language, what are its rhythms, its spatial shapes? How does it move? Where does it speed up, slow down, resist, or yield? Without any equations, you begin to think in phi. If you keep doing this, something gentle happens. You begin to feel less like a stranger in the universe and more like a native speaker, slowly remembering a first language. The confusion of life doesn't vanish, but underneath the noise, you sense an order, a continuity, a lawfulness that doesn't crush freedom, but makes freedom possible. The holophase picture doesn't make life smaller. It reveals that every choice, every relationship, every work of art or science is another way the universe is curling and knotting its single, glorious thread. The deepest promise of this journey is this: understanding reality's language can help us live more wisely inside it, to see more clearly, to predict more honestly, to build more gently, to repair more skillfully, to stand in awe more often. We are not mere spectators of a cosmic show. We are, in our humble, stumbling way, co-authors of a story that began long before us and will continue long after we are gone. Let us write our paragraph well. Salam, and peace be upon you.